All right, let's dive into one of the most chaotic, world-shaping events in all of history, the French Revolution. This is the story of what happens when a kingdom built on centuries of inequality finally and, well, spectacularly explodes. But to really get a feel for how it all went down, we're not going to start at the beginning. No, we're going to drop right into the middle of the chaos. So picture this. It's Paris, July 14th, 1789. The entire city is sitting on a knife's edge, just about ready to boil over. Panic is absolutely ripping through the streets. You've got rumors flying everywhere that the king is about to turn his army on his own people. So thousands of citizens, totally terrified but also furious, start swarming government buildings, desperate to find weapons. And their search leads them all to one place, a grim, medieval fortress that stands for everything they hate, the Bastille prison. This moment right here, this is when the revolution truly ignites. But you gotta ask the question, why? I mean, what could possibly drive regular people, shopkeepers, artists, workers, to storm a massive symbol of royal power? Well, to answer that, we have to look at the powder keg they were all sitting on. For decades, French society wasn't just a kingdom. It was basically a pressure cooker with no way to let off steam. And it was filled with three, let's call them explosive ingredients: staggering inequality, crushing debt, and some radical new ideas. Okay, so check this out. This table lays the injustice of it all bare. Society was split into three groups, or estates. The first two, the clergy and the nobility, made up a tiny 3% of the population, but they owned about a third of all the land and paid, get this, zero taxes. The entire tax burden of the country fell on the third estate, which was, everyone else. And this chart just shows you how insane that imbalance was. You have 97% of the people shouldering 100% of the country's bills, all while having zero privileges, zero power, and absolutely no say in how things were run. I mean, this system wasn't just unfair, it was completely unsustainable. And that brings us to our second explosive ingredient. The country was broke. I mean, utterly, completely, flat broke. When King Louis XVI took the throne, he basically inherited an empty bank account. Years of wild spending and incredibly expensive wars, including, ironically enough, helping to fund the American Revolution, had plunged France into an incredible 3 billion livres of debt. The banks were calling, and the king was pretty much out of options. So for the average person in that 97%, life was becoming an actual struggle to just survive. The population was booming, so there were more mouths to feed, but terrible weather had destroyed the harvests. The price of bread, and this was the food that kept most people alive, it just shot through the roof while their wages didn't budge. This wasn't just an economic slump. People were literally starving. And into this perfect storm of misery and anger fell the third ingredient: ideas. Big ideas. Philosophers from the Enlightenment started questioning everything. Thinkers like John Locke argued against this whole divine right of kings thing, saying, hey, a monarch's power isn't from God, it's from the people, and he has to follow the law like everyone else. Then you've got Jean-Jacques Rousseau, who takes it a step further. He said government should be a social contract, basically an agreement between citizens and the representatives they actually choose for themselves. This was a totally radical idea compared to just being a subject of a king. And finally, Montesquieu came along and provided a kind of blueprint for a new government, one where power wasn't all in one person's hands, but was separated into different branches to keep each other in check. And these ideas weren't just stuck in books, they spread like wildfire through coffee shops and pamphlets, especially to the rising middle class. So you've got this deeply unjust society, a bankrupt government, and a whole population that's now armed with these brand new, revolutionary ideas. All it needed was a spark. And believe it or not, King Louis XVI was about to provide one himself. Desperate for cash, the king calls a meeting of the Estates General, the first one in 1750 years. But the third estate shows up and demands a fair vote. One person, one vote. The king says, no way, and literally locks them out of the meeting hall. But they don't go home. Oh no, instead they find a nearby tennis court, gather together, and swear an oath not to quit until they've written a whole new constitution. In that moment, by declaring themselves the National Assembly, they went from being subjects to being revolutionaries. That act of defiance, followed by the storming of the Bastille, well, that was the explosion. But what came next wasn't some simple, clean transition to a new government. It was a descent into a decade of absolute chaos, war, and terror. I mean, just look how fast everything changes. By 1791, the king is forced to share power. By 92, the monarchy is gone completely. In 93, King Louis XVI is publicly executed. And that sparks the revolution's most radical and bloodiest phase, the Reign of Terror, before all the chaos finally paves the way for military strongman Napoleon Bonaparte. And at the heart of this brutal phase was this machine, the guillotine. It became the chilling symbol of the Reign of Terror, an instrument of state power that was used to execute tens of thousands of people, from nobles to regular citizens, often for nothing more than being an enemy of the revolution. And here's where you see the tragic irony of it all. The whole movement started with these incredible ideals: liberty, equality, fraternity. But it spiraled down into a period defined by total state control, widespread fear, and brutal punishment. The revolution had started to eat its own children. After the main architect of the terror, a guy named Robespierre, was himself guillotined, France was just exhausted. A new, pretty weak government called the Directory took over, but it was a mess. This constant instability created a huge power vacuum, and the nation, desperate for order, was ready to embrace an ambitious general who promised to deliver it. So the revolution ends not with a democracy, but with an emperor, Napoleon. You might be thinking, was it all for nothing? Not even close. The aftershocks of this explosion would go on to reshape the entire world. So that's the big question, right? Why are we still talking about this? Why should an event that happened over 2 centuries ago matter to you and me today? Well, because the revolution basically let the genie out of the bottle, and there was no putting it back in. It championed the radical idea that citizens have rights and can govern themselves. It created the modern idea of nationalism, that you're loyal to a nation of fellow citizens, not just some king. And its ideals of liberty, equality, and fraternity, they became the rallying cry for freedom movements all over the world for the next 200 years. In the end, the French Revolution was so much more than just a chaotic chapter in one country's history. It was the violent, messy, but undeniable birth of the modern political world. And the huge questions it raised about justice, power, and human rights, well, those are the exact same questions we're still debating today.